Welcome to 9-7. Today we're going to talk about the probability of the complement. So far in this chapter, we have been finding the probability of something that we want to have happen. So for example, P of heads is the probability of flipping a coin and it landing on heads. The probability of the complement of an event means that we'll be finding the probability that the event does not happen. So for example, P of not heads is the probability of flipping a coin and it not landing on heads. So to find the probability of the complement of an event, you must first know the probability of the event happening. So to find the probability of the complement, you take 1 minus the probability of your event. So for example, the probability of not rolling a 2. You take the probability that you do roll a 2, which we know should be 1 over 6, and to find the probability of not rolling a 2, we take 1 minus a sixth. Now when we subtract, we like it as fractions, so I can rewrite 1 as 6 over 6. So it's 6 over 6 minus 1 over 6, which would give us 5/6. So the probability of not rolling a 2 would be 5/6. So our first example, we're going to find the probability of not flipping heads. So to do that, the first thing we want to do is find the probability of heads, which we know is 1/2. Okay, so the probability of flipping heads is 1/2. So to find the probability of not heads, we take 1 minus the probability of heads, which is 1/2. Now to subtract, again, we want to rewrite it as a fraction. Since our denominator is 2, we want to rewrite 1 as 2 over 2. So I can take 2 over 2 minus 1 over 2, and that gives me the probability of 1/2. So the probability of not heads is 1/2. The way to check this, if you take the probability that you want it to have happen, and add it to the probability that you don't want it to have happen, you should get 1. Okay, so that's just a way that you can do to check to make sure that you did it correctly. For our next example, we've got the probability of not rolling a 6. So first thing we need to do is find the probability of rolling a 6. Well, there's 1 6 on a 6-sided die, so the probability of rolling a 6 is 1 over 6. So that means that the probability of not rolling a 6, I take 1 minus that 1/6, and again, I want to rewrite the 1 as a fraction to make it easier to subtract. My denominator is a 6, so I want to do 6 over 6 for 1, and do 6 over 6 minus 1/6, and I would get 5/6 is the probability of not rolling a 6. And again, to check this, you can take the probability that you do get what you want plus the probability that you don't get it, and you should get an answer of 1, which we do. 1/6 plus 5/6 is 1. So now we've got a bag that has 7 blue marbles, 4 green marbles, and 9 pink marbles. We draw 1 marble from the bag. We're going to find the probabilities. Okay, so probability of not blue. So the first thing we need to do is find the probability of drawing blue. So there are 7 blue out of a total of 7 plus 4 plus 9. That gives me 20. So the probability of blue is 7 over 20. So the probability of not blue is going to be 1 minus that 7 over 20. And again, I want to rewrite the 1 as a fraction with the same denominator. So since my denominator is 20, I'm going to rewrite 1 as 20 over 20. So I'm going to take 20 over 20 minus 7 over 20. And that gets me my final answer of 13 over 20. Probability of not green. Again, I start with probability of green, which in this case is 4 over 20. And I can simplify that down to 1 over 5. So then to find the probability of not green, I'm going to take 1 minus that 1/5. Again, I want to rewrite the 1 with the same denominator as the other fraction, so I'm going to rewrite it as 5/5. So I'm going to take 5/5 minus 1/5, and I get 4/5 as my final answer. Probability of not pink, I need to start with the probability of pink. Okay, there are 9 pink marbles out of 20, so 9 over 20, I can't simplify that down. So now I can go to the probability of not pink, and that's going to get me 1 minus 9 over 20, And again, I rewrite 1 as a fraction with the same denominator, so I'm going to use it as 20 over 20 minus 9 over 20. And that's going to get me my final answer of 11 over 20. You could also see where we've got it kind of combined with our last lessons. We could have not blue or green. So what I need to do is I need to do probability of blue or green. Okay, the probability of blue is 7 over 20. Probability of green is 4 over 20. So I add those together, giving me 11 over 20. So from there, to find the probability of not blue or green, I take 1 minus the probability of blue or green, which is 11 over 20. Rewrite the 1 as a fraction with the same denominator, so I'm going to use 20 over 20 minus 11 over 20, and that's going to get me a final answer of 9 over 20. So that is possible to have more than one color that we're looking to not have happen. So for our next one, we've got 5 blue, 7 green, and 8 pink marbles in the bag. We're going to draw 1. We're going to find the following probabilities. Probability of not blue, again, we start with the probability of blue, and that's going to be 5 over 20, which I can simplify down to 1/4. So if I want to find the probability of not blue, I'm going to take 1 minus 1/4. I rewrite 1 so that it has the same denominator, so I'm going to use 4/4 minus 1/4, giving me a final answer of 3/4. For our next one, probability of not green, I need to find the probability of green first. Okay, there are 7 out of a total of 20. So the probability of green is 7 over 20. I can't simplify that down. So the probability of not green will be 1 minus that 7 over 20. Rewriting the 1 into 20 over 20 so I can subtract it. 20 over 20 minus 7 over 20 gives me 13 over 20. Probability of not pink, I need to find the probability of pink first. There are 8 out of 20 for pink. I can simplify that down to 2/5. Okay, so the probability of not pink, I take 1 minus 2/5. And again, rewrite the 1 so I can subtract it as 5/5. So 5/5 minus 2/5. That gives me a final answer of 3/5. For our last one, we want the probability of not green or pink. I need to find the probability of green or pink. So the probability of green is 7 over 20. Probability of pink is 8 over 20. That gives me 15 over 20, which I can simplify that down to 3/4. So from there, to find the probability of not green or pink, I take 1 minus the 3/4. And again, rewrite the 1 in terms of fourths so I can subtract. So 4/4 minus 3/4 gives me a final answer of 1/4. So the probability of not green or pink is 1/4.